Hello, everyone. Welcome to the USDA ReConnect virtual post-award workshop. My name is Stephen Pollack, and I am an environmental tech at USDA Rural Development. I'm also joined by my colleague, Alex Anderson. We will be delivering two presentations today. The first, the post-obligation completion of NEPA and Section 106, and then another presentation on NEPA and Section 106. We're going to start with the slides and presentation, then transition to some question and answer. We will take a quick break between the two sessions to allow everyone to log in to the second session. Please note today's presentations will be broadcast through your computer speakers. We will be posting recordings of the presentation on the ReConnect website in the coming days. To ask questions, submit it through the bottom left text box labeled Submit a Question, and we will answer your question as long as time allows. Also, please bear with us as we might encounter some technical challenges throughout the presentation. Let's go ahead and get started. So the agenda for today's slides, we're going to cover 1970 Section 11B, the NPA, and common closing conditions. So as you already know from a bunch of letters that were sent out, you must comply with NEPA and the RD's environmental procedures at 7 CFR Part 1970. This is the new old way of doing things. Prior to this new regulation in 1970, we allowed conditional completion of environmental post-obligation. With the rollout of 1970 back in 2016, RD wanted all of our environmental completed prior to the point of obligation. Over the past 4 years, we found that causes some complications or issues in getting good data especially in competitive programs like the ReConnect program, where applicants would prefer to wait to expend large sums of money or any monies to perform required surveys and draft reports. So a new regulatory change in September of 2019 allowed RD to condition projects, the award of projects on the completion of environmental. So there are 46 some laws and authorities that 1970 and our environmental policy rolls into 1970. The data that you provided during application was enough to show compliance with the majority of those laws and authorities. Most projects are left conditioned on either the Section 106 process or the Section 7 process. And then also due to the late nature of the regulatory change in September of 2019, there were a small subset of projects that were awarded that are subject to the nationwide programmatic agreement. So there are a few applicants that need to comply with the provisions of the NPA, which for the most part are identical to the historic preservation, normal historic preservation requirements. So this slide shows that, as I mentioned there at the bottom, there are 8 projects that were obligated using the NPA, 55 that have incomplete reviews pending either Section 7 or Section 106 or some other environmental resource data to show compliance, and there are 23 that have been completed. So the new provision was a change at 1970 Section 11B. This allowed the administrator to obligate projects subject to the completion of environmental requirements. That includes the Section 106 process, as well as fish and wildlife consultations. One thing that applicants cannot do is they cannot commence construction. So it's important that applicants are aware that there is you cannot move to the construction phase of your project if the environmental has not been completed. So for the small subset of projects that were awarded under the NPA, again, for the most part, the requirements are the same as the traditional Section 106 process, with the big change or big difference being that Section 106 must be initiated within 90 calendar days of the announcement of obligation. So I know out of all the projects that have been obligated, not all of them have been announced yet. So depending on where those 8 projects fall out, the clock may or may not have started for you. Your letters that have been sent out over the past few weeks would have indicated if you were one of the 8 that needs to abide by the provisions of the NPA. Some other common closing conditions. Many projects proposed work that was going to be either through wetlands or floodplains, and while the land these areas would not these resource conditions put in place to avoid the placement of pedestals or other equipment for broadband deployment outside of these areas. Also, if your project crosses lands managed by another federal agency, we must coordinate with those other federal agencies. So just because you've completed the requirements of RUS does not mean that we're issuing you any special use permits or easement right-of-ways for other land managing agencies. We do need to, you are responsible, as with any other project, to comply with those agency requirements to get easements or any other local or state requirements. And then if there's any mitigants or conditions that you do not think would apply based on further design of your project, you can reach out to both the environmental branch through the servicing branch to contend those mitigants, or to update your project to allow us to analyze the impacts as it's currently designed. Note there's another session in about an hour after our Q&A, as well as some additional sessions this afternoon and Monday. So with that, we can transition to the Q&A portion of the webinar. I'll read and answer the submitted questions. Bear with me as I take a moment to organize and review the questions in the queue. So our first question is, in our recent letters that went out, Russ has asked for documentation from BLM and Fish and Wildlife showing that they have reviewed and approved the project. Both of these agencies are confused on the documentation that RUS is requesting. BLM wants to just start on the permits. What exactly does Russ want, and how soon? So for any project that's crossing federally managed lands, RUS needs to coordinate with you, the applicant, and that federal land managing agency. So whoever you're coordinating with, we need to provide that information to Russ so that both the agencies can discuss how we're going to comply with Section 106 and other environmental rules and regs, as well as where this fits into their special use permitting process or easement process. So what exactly does Russ want and how soon? The sooner the better, and we would like those points of contact so we can establish some sort of meeting and procedures for moving forward. Our next question is, I know this is a post-award workshop, but has the Section 106 testing issues been worked out for FOA 2 applications? Thank you for that. As of earlier today, no, I do not believe that the system has been updated. And for those of you who are not familiar with this, is that our US has identified, bear with me 1 second. Russ has identified that the logic driving the Section 106 EQ in the application system is not correct for round 2. Russ is working to address this concern, and the system is a critical priority. We do have available some updated logic if anyone is applying for round 2 and would like to get a copy of that logic. We could probably send it out after these webinars today. If your project consists of the new logic, consists entirely of new underground fiber and existing right-of-way or aerial fiber on existing poles, and is not traversing lands managed by a federal agency or identified as tribal, then the Section 106 EQ would not be required for these FOA 2 projects. So if you would like more information on that, please reach out to either the ReConnect environmental at USDA.gov email or via the contacts for this webinar. We understand that our environmental review has to be determined to be complete. When can we expect to receive a letter from Russ? If you have not received the letter in the past few weeks from RUS, I know there's a few outstanding ones that we're waiting for either some programmatic agreements to be coordinated, as well as some Section 7 work that Russ was undertaking on behalf of the applicant. So if you feel that your project has completed the environmental review process and you've answered whatever the requirements were from your recent letter, I've not received a letter, you can reach out to the servicing branch or the ReConnect environmental email. While I wait for more questions, I would like to offer that for any applicants that still have Section 106, the Section 106 process pending, I would encourage you to enlist an SOI qualified individual to assist in that process. It really helps streamline and expedite the process when the SHPOs and other interested parties know that they're working with someone who understands the Section 106 process and the nuances of cultural resources. If a project plans change, what does an applicant need to submit for an amendment? The example here is moving sections from a public to private right-of-way. So all changes should be submitted to the servicing branch as far as what the requirement would be for environmental. The servicing branch would determine if it was a large enough change, send it over to our shop. And if you're moving from public to private right-of-way, as long as all the right-of-way was existing, then it wouldn't be a huge level of effort. If you're requiring a new easement or new right-of-way, then we would need to look at potential impacts from that new right-of-way. So I received several questions about an SOI qualified individual. That's the Secretary of Interior qualified individual. They meet certain standards set forth by the Secretary of Interior relating to cultural resources. And just off the top of my head includes architects, archaeologists, historians, historical architects. I know there's 5, but I'm sorry, I'm drawing a blank. But we can provide what an SOI qualified individual is. Also, your SHPOs, not all of them, but many of them do have a website that lists they have on their website a list of firms and qualified individuals that are available. But you can either hire an outside firm or hire an individual to work for your firm that would be SOI qualified. But I would highly recommend it because it will expedite the process. So wait a few more moments for any late-breaking questions. One other clarification I'd like for anyone undergo the Section 106 process. I know most of the letters that went out indicated that the applicant needs to initiate the Section 106 process. In order for the environmental review to be complete, the Section 106 process has to be concluded. So just sending the initiation letters to the SHPO, that's just the first step of the process. A lot of SHPOs are answering back with some generic terms about identifying the APE and providing additional data to support a finding. So a finding of effect needs to be proposed to the SHPO and any other interested parties. So some additional questions have come in. Once an awardee receives environmental clearance, does the applicant require a second letter from USDA providing the right to proceed with project download? In other words, is there another step by USDA giving its blessing once the environmental review is complete? Yes, you will be formally notified that that USDA considers the environmental review complete once it's been completed. So with regards to Section 106, if a SHPO responds that they will require further study done by an archaeologist, do we have the archaeologist do a literature study, then provide the results to us before trying to coordinate the results with the SHPO? This is where an SOI qualified individual would be helpful for you. Russ is here to assist in any way, shape, or form shy of performing the literature search. If you enlist a archaeological firm to perform a lit search for you, and the results of that lit search perhaps indicate that that consultant thinks there'd be more survey required, and you would disagree with that, I would encourage you to reach out to the Russ Environmental staff through either, if you have our contact existing, or the ReConnect Environmental email, and we can go through the lit search and help you determine what an appropriate level of survey or effort would be required above the literature search. So I guess the answer to the question is there's no requirement that you send it to Russ before coordinating the results with the SHPO, but if during any part of the process you're uncomfortable or with the requests that are being made, or there's some sort of disagreement between the parties that are involved, please enlist RUS so that we can help advocate and clarify any positions. So another question, just to clarify, if we received a letter indicating that the environmental review is complete and we can begin construction, we have no NEPA obligation. If you have received a letter that the environmental review is complete, it's complete, and you can move on to construction unless there is some other condition unrelated to NEPA. But that'll be something to discuss with the servicing branch. But yes, as far as from an environmental perspective, if you have received a letter from RU now there were several letters that went out that said Russ is still reviewing your application and know it is required at this time. So please read your letters carefully. If you have any questions, you can definitely reach out and ask for clarification again from either from the environmental branch or the servicing branch. The next question is, do you have to hire an SOI qualified individual, or only if the project is on tribal or federal lands? While there's not necessarily a requirement to hire an SOI qualified individual, I would highly recommend it for any projects that still need to undergo the Section 106 process. I think it would help expedite the process, as well as some of the assumptions or, some of the findings and the nuances of the Section 106 process are best handled by someone who is SOI qualified. So while there's no RUS requirement to hire an SOI qualified individual, there are requirements in the National Historic Preservation Act that the people that perform this work and these assumptions are qualified. Is the servicing branch the GFR? The GFR is also a great resource. No, technically the GFR is not the servicing branch. The GFR is also a great place to start. Pardon me for not mentioning them sooner. your GFRs are a great resource to answer some of the easier questions, and then they also know who to contact, whether it be in the environmental shop or the servicing branch for some of the more nuanced questions. So we're gonna wait a few more minutes to see if there's any additional questions. Pardon me for all of the acronyms. The GF is your General Field Representative. They're individuals that work for the program. This is a program that's managed mostly at the national office level out of Washington, D.C., but every state has an assigned General Field Representative that is, if not in your state, at least more local to your state. Sometimes some field representatives cover 2 or 3 states. There's a listing of these general field reps on the USDA Telecom website. If you're not already familiar with your general field representative, they are a great resource for all aspects of both applying for telecom financing and the servicing aspect as you move through completing environmental reviews, construction, and then the financing pieces of it also. Next question is about nomenclature of branches. It's just an organizational term. So at the environmental servicing division, it's just how the organization is structured. So I'm not the only environmental person that works for us. I work in a shop of environmental people that we would refer to ourselves as the environmental branch or servicing branch, same thing. That's not their official title. The environmental shop is EES, Environmental and Engineering Services. Pardon me for the bureaucratic jargon. All right, I'm getting some feedback that the video is a little patchy, so we'll try and wrap this up and address those issues before our 1 p.m. session in about a half an hour. So please join us back at the other link for additional Section 106 and environmental presentation at 1 o'clock. Thank you.